Greetings, respected viewers. I'm George from Ireland, and here I am in Cheapside in London. That's the name of the street, not Cheapside Street, simply Cheapside. So I'm in the city of London, and behind me is St Mary Le Bow, this church I'd like to show you. This very fine campanile with its belfry. Yeah, we can see it right there above the clock. So this church dates from 1080. And it was destroyed in the Great Fire of London into September 1666. The Great Fire of London, which broke out at Pudding Mill Lane, not so far from here. Probably just an accidental spark in a bakery. Some people say it was a carpet factory. And then there were lots of conspiracy theories back then. The Roman Catholic minority was the despised social group at the time. And it was pinned on them. So not far from here is a place called Monument, where there is a very big obelisk to commemorate the Great Fire of London, and it's only about 100 meters from where the Great Fire of London broke out. So yeah, this church was destroyed, but the crypt remained intact. So it's later redesigned by Sir Christopher Wren and built on the same site. Sir Christopher Wren, who was the most celebrated architect of the late 17th century, despite having no formal training in architecture. An architect was anybody who called himself an architect. There were no formal qualifications to do the job, and these things just weren't regulated. Governments didn't concern itself with that kind of thing, making laws about, who is an architect, what must architects do. That all came rather later. It was all very informal. So Sir Christopher Wren and his pupil, Sir Nicholas Hawksmoor, they designed so many churches of the City of London. Now, when I say City of London, I don't simply mean I'm saying London in a more convoluted manner. The City of London really just does mean this area, as in it's the financial district near St Paul's Cathedral. The Bank of England is down the street. You probably can't quite make it out, and the church of and St Paul's Cathedral, the largest church in England, is about a quarter of a mile that way. You can't see it, even if I did turn around. There are buildings in the way. So St Mary Le Bow, then it was destroyed again by Luftwaffe bombs in 1941, and then it was reconstructed in 1964. But it's been quite faithful to its plans from beforehand. It was extensively photographed well before the Second World War. You can see these cherubic figures here above the door. Look at the detail that went into that. How about that for handicraft? A little wooden door with the spikes above and the huge lantern. Anyway, so it was a Cordwainer's church. Now, what is a Cordwainer? Well, there's the Worshipful Company of Cordwainers. There are lots of these livery companies in the City of London. So the City of London is about a square mile around St Paul's Cathedral. And now I know we have Greater London, which includes the City of London and includes the City of Westminster and many other boroughs. This is commonly called London. But these worshipful companies, well, they're really medieval guilds. They're not companies in the modern sense of the word company, as in they're just trying to make a profit as such. It's more like a trade association, a professional association. So the Worshipful Company of Cordwainers, for those who were in the leather trade, I'll tell you why. It's not rope, as is often erroneously believed, because they imported things from Cordoba in Spain. And these things were called Cordovan or whatever, and that corrupted into Cordwainer. Things you made from soft leather, particularly shoes in those days. So Iberian leather was thought to be very fine. And the Worshipful Company would regulate this trade. Say, if you want to be a member of this trade, then you have to serve an apprenticeship, typically beginning at the age of 14, carrying on for 7 years unpaid, sometimes treated like a slave. And then about the age of 21, produce a masterpiece. In this case, it would be a superb pair of shoes or some other leather goods. And if the other master craftsman of this worshipful company of Cordwainers judged that this was of sufficient quality, then you were a master craftsman, a full member of the Worshipful Company of Cordwainers. What does the worshipful bit mean? Well, they worship together. They stayed together because they prayed together. There was a religious aspect to it. So they would worship here several times a year, on high holy days, the Feast of Obligation. So to begin with, only Catholics could join. Remember, everybody in England was Catholic until the 1530s. And then obviously only Anglicans, members of the Church of England, could join. Then they allowed Protestants of other denominations like Baptists and Methodists to join. And then obviously Catholics were allowed in the 1820s after Catholic emancipation, 1829, Jews in the 1850s, and then from the 1870s all religions. So these worshipful companies still exist. There are about 120 of them. The Worshipful Company of Grocers, the Worshipful Company of Mercers, the Worshipful Company of Airline Pilots, and on and on and on. They founded some of them just very recently, but for the most part they have no connection with the original trade they're named for. People in the Worshipful Company of Cordwainers are usually not connected to leather goods at all. They're people who work in the financial sector, they're bankers, they're stockbrokers, they're insurance brokers, and so forth. And they just work around here where the London Stock Exchange is very close, lots of banks and insurance companies are here. So anyway, that's that. So they would worship there. So the religious side still exists, but it's optional. Really going to their carol service, having their dinner party, and that's that. And it's a charity. They're raising money for good causes. In the old days, there was no welfare state. They all donated money. They'd look after someone who's ill, unable to work. They would set minimum prices, maximum prices. They would also donate money to look after the orphans or the widow of a member who had died, and blah, blah, blah. So that's what these livery companies are like. They're called livery companies because they were allowed to wear a uniform. And also the word livery then was related to delivery, like livraison in French. So if someone was going to collect something, you need to know you're giving it to the right person. This being an era where most people were illiterate, so somebody wearing the uniform to hand over whatever goods it was, or somebody delivering or collecting, so had to wear that uniform. Okay, so it used to be said about this church that a Cockney, that's a working class Londoner, was born to the sound of Bow bells, born sufficiently close to this that you would have been able to hear the bells of Bow Church ringing as he was being born, or she was being born. So that's that. Now there is an area in East London, about 5 miles east of here, also called Bow, and there is a Bow Church there. And it's often wrongly believed that this whole legend about born to the sound of Bow bells relates to that church. It does not. This relates to this one right here. And I remember we were going to a pantomime last year in Hammersmith at the Lyric Theatre, and there was one character called Bow Bells. So she was the spirit of London, Bow Bells. So here we are. So a Cockney really just means a working class person from London. I don't know, I can't quite remember the etymology of it, why it's called Cockney. It's nothing to do with the vulgar word for the male generative organ. And then it's used more loosely, even if you're not born anywhere near Bow. Remember Bruce Reynolds in his autobiography Thief said being born at Charing Cross Hospital, which then really was by Charing Cross, you could just about hear the sound of Bow bells, a Cockney by the skin of his teeth. So yeah, the crypt is the underground bit. It means secret or hidden in ancient Greek, as in that's where you put tombs. And that is original and is one of the oldest rooms in London, been in continuous use since the year 1080. Anything else I should tell you about this? Yeah, so this is the church for the Cordwainers company, and they have their carol service and things like that. It's got a statue here of Sir John Smith. I might talk about him sometime later, as in chap who helped to set up Virginia, and he was a member of the Worshipful Company of Cordwainers, and indeed he preached a sermon in this church shortly before he set off with what was then called the New World. He's the man who met Pocahontas. No, not Elizabeth Warren, but when he was captured by an indigenous tribe in Virginia, and they were going to kill him, and she intervened and persuaded them not to. You may have seen the Hollywood cartoon. Now, she did marry an Englishman. She didn't marry him, somebody else. She came here, lived at Brentford, which is about 10 miles west of here, and died after only a couple of years. But she was lionized by London society for her short time here. But the Hollywood movie is not entirely accurate. Anyway, that's probably enough about John Smith. Pocahontas' grave is lost. People are not quite sure where it is. Okay, so you may know the children's rhyme. Say, oranges and lemons, say the bells of St. Clement's. St. Clement's being a church only about a mile from here. And it's got various rhymes which supposedly go with the sounds of the bells of churches around this area. And then, when will you pay me, say the bells of Old Bailey. And the one for this one is, I don't know, says the great bell of Bow. That's the ditty which goes with this particular house of worship. All right, so please support me on Patreon, or better still on PayPal, georgecallahan79@gmail.com. You'll find me that way. Find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, book online lessons with me in any humanities subject, including French for A-level, GCSE, International Baccalaureate, interview practice. I edit documents, I translate from French, Spanish, Italian, German, Russian, and Romanian, legal documents in particular, and book me as your tour guide in London. All right, signing off. Good night.